June 5th, 1944. A German reconnaissance plane flew over southern England, searching for signs of the massive Allied invasion everyone knew was coming. The pilot spotted exactly what he expected: thousands of tanks, hundreds of landing craft, entire armies preparing to cross the channel. He photographed it all and returned to base, confident his intelligence would help Germany prepare its defenses. There was just one problem. Everything he saw was fake. Every tank was inflatable rubber. Every landing craft was painted plywood. Every soldier was a phantom. This was Operation Fortitude, the most audacious deception in military history, and it had to work perfectly, because the real invasion force of 150,000 men was gathering 200 miles away, preparing to storm the beaches of Normandy. One wrong move, one discovered secret, and D-Day would become a catastrophe. So how did the Allies pull off the impossible? How do you hide an army? Today we uncover the ingenious tricks, elaborate lies, and brilliant minds that made D-Day possible. By 1944, Nazi Germany controlled most of Europe. Hitler's Atlantic Wall, a chain of fortifications stretching from Norway to the Spanish border, stood as a formidable barrier against invasion. The Allies knew that liberating Europe required a massive amphibious assault, but they faced an impossible challenge. How do you surprise an enemy who knows you're coming? The Germans expected an invasion. The question wasn't if, but where and when. The most logical target was Pas de Calais, the narrowest point of the English Channel, just 21 miles from the English coast. It offered the shortest sea crossing and the most direct route to Germany. Hitler and his generals believed this would be the invasion site. The Allies, however, had chosen Normandy, 200 miles to the west. The beaches there were less heavily defended, but the approach was longer and riskier. If the Germans discovered the true target and concentrated their forces there, the invasion would fail before it began. The challenge was unprecedented. Hide 150,000 troops, 5,000 ships, 11,000 aircraft, and mountains of supplies, while convincing the enemy you're attacking somewhere else entirely. Success required more than secrecy. It demanded an elaborate performance, one that would fool not just German intelligence, but Hitler himself. Enter Operation Fortitude, a deception so complex it involved fake armies, double agents, dummy equipment, and even a ghost commanding a phantom force. The mastermind behind Operation Fortitude was the London Controlling Section, a secretive British intelligence unit led by Colonel John Bevan. Working alongside American intelligence, they crafted a two-part deception: Fortitude North and Fortitude South. Fortitude North aimed to convince the Germans that an invasion of Norway was imminent. This would tie down German divisions in Scandinavia, far from France. Fortitude South, the more critical operation, would persuade Hitler that Pas de Calais was the real target, and that Normandy, when it came, was merely a diversion. The deception required layers of lies, each supporting the other, creating a false reality the Germans would believe. At the heart of Fortitude South was the 1st United States Army Group, or FUSAG, supposedly the largest Allied force in Britain, positioned in southeast England directly across from Pas de Calais. There was just one catch. FUSAG didn't exist. Not a single soldier in this army was real. The fictitious force was commanded by General George S. Patton, one of America's most aggressive and well-known generals. The Germans respected and feared Patton, believing he would lead any major invasion. By placing him in command of FUSAG, the Allies reinforced the lie. Patton himself was kept in southeast England, making public appearances, giving speeches, and being photographed, all to maintain the illusion. Creating a phantom army wasn't just about paperwork and press releases. It required physical evidence that German reconnaissance could observe. Enter the artists, engineers, and prop makers who built an army out of thin air. Dummy tanks made from inflatable rubber and wooden frames were scattered across fields in Kent and Sussex. From the air, they looked identical to real Sherman tanks. Fake landing craft, constructed from canvas stretched over wooden frames, filled harbors and rivers. These decoys were painted to match real equipment and positioned where German spy planes could photograph them. To add authenticity, Allied engineers created fake radio traffic. Hundreds of operators transmitted messages between non-existent units, discussing supply problems, training schedules, and operational orders. German listening posts intercepted these communications, creating the impression of a massive force preparing for action. The Allies even went so far as to construct entire fake headquarters, complete with vehicles coming and going, soldiers saluting officers who didn't command real units, and laundry lines strung with uniforms, all visible to aerial reconnaissance. While dummy tanks fooled cameras, human intelligence was harder to deceive. The Germans relied on a network of spies in Britain to provide information about Allied preparations. What they didn't know was that British counterintelligence, through the double-cross system, had captured or turned every single German agent in Britain. These double agents, now working for the Allies, fed carefully crafted misinformation back to Berlin. One of the most important was Juan Pujol Garcia, codenamed Garbo by the British. A Spaniard who despised fascism, Garbo created an entire network of fictional sub-agents, supposedly reporting from across Britain. His reports were so detailed and convincing that the Germans considered him their most valuable spy in Britain. In reality, everything he sent was false, designed to support Operation Fortitude. Garbo reported on Fusag's buildup, describing troop movements, equipment stockpiles, and training exercises, all carefully timed to reinforce the deception. His messages were so trusted that when he warned the Germans of the Normandy landings just hours before they began, his credibility was unshaken because he claimed Normandy was a diversion and the real attack would still come at Pas de Calais. Another crucial agent was Roman Czerniawski, codenamed Brutus, a Polish Air Force officer who had been captured and turned by the Germans, then returned by British intelligence. His reports corroborated Garbo's information, adding layers of verification. The Germans trusted him because he had previously provided accurate intelligence about RAF operations. Now he fed them lies about Fusag and the Pas de Calais invasion plan. The double agent's work was coordinated with meticulous care. Each false report had to align with the others, creating a consistent narrative. If one agent contradicted another, the entire deception could collapse. British intelligence officers spent countless hours crafting messages, ensuring dates, unit numbers, and locations matched perfectly. The Germans never suspected they were being systematically deceived by their own intelligence network. Deception alone wasn't enough. The Allies needed to ensure absolute secrecy about the real invasion. Southern England became a restricted zone, with civilians banned from coastal areas and mail censored. Troops preparing for D-Day were confined to camps, sealed off from the outside world. Even they didn't know where they were going until days before the invasion. Security was so tight that when a crossword puzzle in the Daily Telegraph contained several D-Day code words, including Overlord, Utah, and Omaha, British intelligence immediately investigated, fearing a security breach. They discovered the crossword compiler was innocent, the words were coincidental, but the incident highlighted how seriously the Allies took secrecy. To maintain the deception, real preparations for Normandy had to be hidden. The actual invasion force gathered in southwestern England, away from German observation. Ports in Devon, Dorset, and Hampshire were packed with real ships and troops, but these areas were heavily camouflaged. Netting covered equipment, paint-disguised landing craft, and strict blackout rules prevented any light that might attract German reconnaissance. Meanwhile, in southeast England, the fake Fusag continued its visible buildup, drawing German attention away from the real preparations. The Allies even used the weather as cover. Forecasters studied patterns, knowing that a brief window of acceptable conditions would occur in early June. By timing the invasion for this narrow opportunity, they caught the Germans off guard. German meteorologists predicted storms would make an invasion impossible, leading many officers to leave their posts. Rommel himself returned to Germany for his wife's birthday, confident no attack was imminent. The final element of the deception involved air superiority and strategic bombing. Allied aircraft dominated the skies over Europe, and they used this advantage to support Fortitude. For every bomb dropped on Normandy, 2 were dropped on Pas de Calais, reinforcing the impression that Calais was the target. Railway lines, bridges, and coastal defenses near Calais were systematically destroyed, while Normandy received just enough bombing to avoid suspicion. This pattern convinced German commanders that the Allies were preparing the battlefield at Calais. Allied fighters and bombers also attacked German radar installations, blinding them in key areas. On the night before D-Day, bombers dropped metallic strips called chaff over the channel, creating false radar signatures that mimicked invasion fleets heading toward Calais. Small boats towed barrage balloons, creating radar echoes that looked like large ships. German radar operators saw what appeared to be massive fleets approaching Calais, while the real invasion force sailed toward Normandy, largely undetected. The deception even extended to airborne operations. Allied paratroopers dropped dummy soldiers, equipped with firecrackers and sound devices, behind German lines near Calais. These dummies created the illusion of a large-scale airborne assault, drawing German attention and reinforcements away from Normandy. On the morning of June 6, 1944, the deception reached its climax. As Allied troops stormed the beaches of Normandy, German commanders remained convinced it was a diversion. Hitler, still asleep when the first reports arrived, had ordered that he not be woken. When he finally learned of the attack, he hesitated to release panzer reserves, believing the real invasion would still come at Pas de Calais. This hesitation proved catastrophic for Germany. The beaches of Normandy, codenamed Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword, became the site of the largest amphibious invasion in history. Despite fierce resistance, especially at Omaha Beach, Allied forces established a foothold. Crucially, German reinforcements that could have repelled the invasion remained stationed at Calais, waiting for an attack that would never come. For weeks after D-Day, the Allies maintained the deception. Garbo sent messages claiming that captured German documents revealed Normandy was indeed a diversion. He reported that Fusag was still preparing for the main assault at Calais. The Germans believed him. Even as Allied forces broke out from Normandy and began liberating France, German high command kept divisions at Calais, paralyzed by the fear of a second invasion. This strategic paralysis bought the Allies precious time to establish supply lines and reinforce their positions. By the time Hitler realized there would be no second invasion, it was too late. The Normandy invasion had succeeded, and the liberation of Western Europe was underway. The success of Operation Fortitude demonstrates the power of deception in warfare. By combining fake equipment, double agents, misleading communications, and strategic bombing, the Allies created a false reality so convincing that Hitler himself was fooled. The Phantom Army of Fusag tied down German divisions that could have turned D-Day into a disaster. Every inflatable tank, every fake radio message, every lie told by double agents contributed to saving thousands of Allied lives. The men who stormed the beaches didn't know it, but their success was built on months of careful deception by intelligence officers, engineers, and agents working behind the scenes. Operation Fortitude also revealed the importance of counterintelligence. The double-cross system's success in controlling German spies meant the Allies could feed Berlin exactly the information they wanted them to have. This level of intelligence dominance was unprecedented and has rarely been replicated since. Perhaps most remarkably, the Germans never fully understood how completely they had been deceived. Even after the war, some officers refused to believe that Fusag was entirely fake, convinced that the Allies must have had some real force in reserve. The deception was so thorough, so detailed, that it survived scrutiny even in hindsight. Today, Operation Fortitude is studied in military academies worldwide as a masterclass in deception and strategic planning. It showed that wars are won not just with firepower, but with intelligence, creativity, and the ability to think several steps ahead of your enemy. The lessons learned from Fortitude influenced Cold War intelligence operations and continue to shape modern military strategy. The men and women who planned and executed Fortitude remain largely unknown, their work classified for decades after the war. Yet their contribution to Allied victory was immense. By hiding 150,000 troops and convincing Hitler to look the wrong way, they changed the course of history. D-Day succeeded, not just because of the bravery of the soldiers who landed on those beaches, but because of the invisible army of deceivers who made the impossible possible. The greatest trick the Allies ever pulled was making Hitler believe in an army that didn't exist, and in doing so, they opened the door to victory in Europe. Well, that's it. Thanks for watching. We hope you found this video informative. If you enjoyed learning about today's topic, make sure to check out our other videos about World War II. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on more history content. See you in the next one.